Would you like more joy, peace, and contentment in your life? If so, say, I. I. Who doesn't, right? Aristotle, the great philosopher, said that the ultimate aim of everyone is happiness. We think it's the new car, we think it's the decorated apartment, or we think it's the life partner that's going to ultimately bring us the happiness. But if you look around and you look at experience, we ultimately find, no, that's not actually going to do it. The life partner is not going to bring you contentment, peace, and happiness. It's nice to have a life partner that's harmonious and it adds a lot to our life, but ultimately you're here to serve that person. You're here to be, to give. You're here to help make their life happier, see? And ultimately, we've got to find that peace, that happiness within. And I know that since you're watching this and listening to this, you know that. You have learned from experience that, yeah, the world isn't quite going to do it for me. I've got to find another way. Many of us have experienced anguishing monotony from doing things the way the world thinks that that's the way they should be done. Man, I first realized that when I was a freshman in college. And I was, one day I was looking into the mirror and I noticed the lights had gone dim in my eyes. And I thought to myself, what happened to all that enthusiasm? What happened to that joy that just months ago I had? Something happened, and I'll tell you, it doesn't take long, folks. There's a lot of people out there who are happy with their lives. You know, everything's going the way they want them to do. I don't know how many people it's like that, but you know, things are pretty good. But you just never know when something's going to happen that can really uproot your life. And that's why it's important not to build your house on sand, as Jesus, the way shower and teacher and friend, talked about. Don't build your house on sand, build it on rock. Well, apparently to some degree my house was built on sand because I had been happy, but then I got into my first romantic relationship and it was wonderful and it was terrible all at the same time, right? It was full of passion and excitement and joy and love, and it was also full of arguing and bickering and confusion and all that stuff. How many of you have had that experience in a relationship before? Man, yeah, it happens. I just thought it was my mom and, you know, my parents. It was just them. No, it's called human nature. It's called two humans getting together and having to adjust to each other. Anyway, all that was going on. And then when I went to school, I'm giving you the short end of it, I started to develop social anxiety. Never felt it before in my life. Never had a self-conscious bone in my body that I could remember interacting with people before that time. And just everything came together to where I just started to feel anxious and self-conscious. Even with family members at one point, it was really ridiculous. It's amazing how this mind can really mess you up. It really can. It can really mess you up. And I say the mind, not you. I'm not saying I messed myself up. The mind. You're not the mind. You're not your mind. You and I are the one that lives in this body, has a mind, has a body, has emotions. And I don't think it's too much to keep repeating that because most people don't know that. So that was happening. And also what else was happening in my little mind and little sense of the world, I had had such an amazing experience in high school that I felt like I'd been on the top of the world. I really did. It was like, wow, this was amazing what just happened. And now I got to do it all over again. Now what? Now I got to study again. I got to what? Get a career, get a job, get married, have kids, make money, grow older, die. I mean, I had a pretty bleak attitude at that point. Throw in all the confusion with all the other stuff going on, I was lost. Later on, when I heard the song Amazing Grace, I once was lost and now I was found, I knew what that meant because I was lost. I had been happy and now I was unhappy and I didn't know how to get back to that happiness. And that woke me up, started my waking up process. I started to search. I started to read books, picked up one of my mom's yoga books, To Know Yourself by the late Swami Satchidananda. He was a yoga master back in the days when that stuff was weird. Okay? He was a yoga master. And I started searching. And over time, my mind got clearer. I started to discover inner joy, inner peace, inner calmness, and eventually I started to overcome the social anxiety and so on, for the most part. Every now and then it can rear its head, but you know, life got a whole lot different and a whole lot better. And at one point I felt like I'm back to myself, okay? And that can happen to anybody. I don't care what your challenge is. I'm not saying it's gonna be easy. It wasn't easy. It was challenging, but I grew from it. And we grow from our experiences. So, you know, I reached that point, as the sage said, of anguishing monotony. It just felt like monotony. I had the peak. I had all that for my little mind, my little experience. I had everything at one point. And then it was like, all right, what else is there? Because it's not that great. It's okay, but it ain't that great. Something was missing. And you know what? If we're honest with ourselves and we look deep within, something's missing. If we look at ourselves, we realize that I'm not okay inside. I'm a little, you know, anxious or worried or fearful. Maybe there's some moments of happiness and joy we might experience. But if you're honest with yourself, you probably will say, yeah, you're right. There is something that's a little out of whack inside. And I would like to have more joy and less worry and less fear and less insecurity and less jealousy and envy and less needing things to be a certain way and, you know, trying to control everything. There's nothing wrong with any of that. I mean, you know, I'm not being judgmental here. I'm not making moral judgments. We can do that all we want. Hey, go after whatever we want. That's fine. Nothing wrong with that. It's just not going to work. It's not going to be fulfilling. I was inspired at that time in college. I decided to read a book by Henry David Thoreau called Walden, where he basically went to the woods and lived by a lake, and he wanted to live simply. He said, I went to the woods to live simpler. I wanted to live life simply. I wanted to live life fully and suck the marrow out of life. I thought, wow, that sentence really grabbed me. I was like, that's what I want. I want to live my life fully too. I want to suck the marrow out of life. And guess what? That's spiritual growth. That's personal growth. It's not, you can't just say, oh, I want to live life fully and now you're doing it. No, it's work, it's effort, it takes energy because we're so conditioned with the other stuff. And so here's the challenge with living life fully, with sucking the marrow out of life. And hey, it's expressed by the Buddha. And that's not the Buddha, but it's a pretty good quote. But here's the Buddha. Where did the Buddha go? Do not pursue the past. Do not lose yourself in the future. Look deeply at life as it is in this very moment for stability and freedom. Isn't that what we want? We want freedom. We want freedom from worry and anxiousness and need and, you know, all that, having to control everybody and everything. If we're honest with ourselves, we could probably see all that happening. We want freedom from that. And here's the challenge. The challenge to that, as is pointed out by many great teachers and sages, is that we identify with the mind. We identify with the mind. We've been conditioned to think that I am my thoughts, I'm my emotions, and so we're always trying to think and figure stuff out and always solving a problem, always the mind is always going. You know, why did she say that to me? And blah, blah, blah. You know, we've got judgments and evaluations and criticisms about everything. Why is he driving that way? Why is she dressed that way? And of ourselves, you know, looking in the mirror, oh, I got another gray hair, or oh, another wrinkle, or, you know, it just goes on and on and on. Why? Because that's how the mind is. That's the mind separate from being connected with the self. That's how the mind is. And when we identify with that mind like that, it just goes on and on and on and on. And you're on a treadmill of junk continually. Anybody know that treadmill? Yes. Yes. Do we want to get off the treadmill? Because that's what we need to do. We've got to cease identifying with the mind and learn to be more identified with our true nature, which is what? Who we really are. Well, who am I? Who are we really? We are God being God as us. Well, what does that mean? That means that you in there, hello in there, you in there, who is aware of your thoughts, who is aware of your emotions, you are consciousness. That's who you are. You're not Justin, you're not John, you're not Jane, you're not Mary. You are you in there, consciousness. That is an expression of the consciousness of the one consciousness, spirit, right? That's who you are. Now, why is that important? That's important because now when you are in that awareness state, now you can watch those thoughts without getting sucked into those thoughts. How do you get sucked into those thoughts? Why did she say that to me? That's just not right. She needs to treat me with greater respect. You know, see what I'm saying? Now you're on a train of drama. As opposed to, okay, I see those thoughts going on in there. I'm not going to go there. Or I'm just going to feel that anger, that frustration, that sadness. But I'm not that sadness, so I can watch it. See, it's when we identify with it that we get in trouble. Oh, I'm so sad. Now you're the sadness. You're not the sadness. You're having an experience. Your heart is sad. What's the difference? The difference is you're the one watching it. You are much higher than the vibration of sadness and thinking. You understand that? You are the one in there. You're living in a higher dimension than your thoughts and your feelings. So yes, your heart may be feeling sadness. Your mind might be full of mishigash, to use a little Yiddish. But you are the one watching, or you can be. And the goal is to be in that awareness state all the time. Why? Because now you can live your life and not get sucked into the mind and the emotions. You can still enjoy what's happening. Ideally, we're rooted in that seat of self and we can enjoy even the mishigash as it goes on, right? I mean, don't we like movies? Most people like movies. I don't understand people who don't like movies, but anyway, most people like movies. Why? You're watching a bunch of drama going on, and it's kind of fun, isn't it? What if our life became a movie? Wouldn't that be cool? Oh, look what Justin's doing again. Look at the mind going about that. Ah, isn't that interesting? Look at these feelings going on. That's what the poet Rumi talked about. He talked about, watching and enjoying all the kinds of emotions that are happening. That's a very high state, folks. What we're talking about now is not, oh, I've heard that before. Yeah, are you doing it? Are we living it? And if we aren't living it, then it doesn't mean anything. Spirituality is about transforming our consciousness. It's about life. It's not about, I read Wayne Dyer and I've read all of, this and that, and I've done this and I've been to the Himalayas, and all that's nice, but that's not spirituality. Oh, but I meditate every day. That's fine. what are you doing the rest of your life? How are you living the rest of the day? I used to have a neighbor who was very into spirituality. You know, he was very into meditation, and he had the books of the Himalayan masters, and he had crystals and all kinds of stuff. And I loved him, you know. He was a fun man. He was a nice man. But sometimes it was like, whoa, where did that behavior come from? That's not spiritual behavior. So let me show you what I really want us to practice today. And it has to do with, again, first, but in order to do it, you got to remember I'm not my mind, right? I'm the observer. Here's the practice. The sage Patanjali, he wrote down the truths of the great enlightened masters, okay? And it's called the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. A sutra is a short statement of truth. And so he took these teachings that were passed down, this is thousands of years ago, and he wrote them down. And one of the things he said, he talked about the state of mind in which the subject and object are one. State of mind in which the subject and the object are one. Stay with me. I'm not going to get too complicated because this is not all that mystical, okay? Abraham Maslow, the great psychologist, who, by the way, you know, nowadays you hear on the radio, oh, there's a new research on happiness, or these books out on happiness and positive psychology, which I love, by the way. I read some of the first ones when they first started coming out in the early 90s. I love them. It's great having that research. Abraham Maslow was the guy who kind of started all that, really. He was interested in studying peak experiences. He was interested in studying what do healthy people do. Because back in his day, it was all about, let's study unhealthy people and figure out how to make them less unhealthy. Then Maslow came along and said, you know, why don't we study healthy people? Why don't we study people who are high performing and living life fully? Let's see what they do and imitate them. And so, you know, kudos to him, Abraham Maslow. He talked about peak experiences. Peak experience where you're in the present moment. You are living in the now, fully and completely, and there is an uplifted state that happens. How many uplifted peak experiences have you had in your life? I'm going to guess not that many. For most people, there's a few. You know, the birth of a child, maybe the wedding day, wedding ceremony, maybe somebody was out in nature and they were skiing down a mountain and all of a sudden they just felt one with the wind and the mountains and they had this sense of oneness. It can happen in anything. You see it in sports. I believe it was Mickey Mantle who said that when he was in the zone, in a peak experience, as Csikszentmihalyi talked about flow, in the flow, the ball would get bigger. It looked bigger. Athletes sometimes enter into that zone state. You see it in the Olympics. Some of these people are just totally in the moment. They're free of fear. And it's amazing to be in that state, you know, in under such pressure. Doesn't mean they're not have some kind of tension, but they're totally in the now and the focus. And they could be in a peak experience. How many have we had? Here's what some of the sages have told us. Every moment can be a peak experience. I don't know about you, but I can't think of anything better than that. Every moment can be a peak experience. Isn't that what people really would like? Hey, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you want every moment to be a peak experience? Isn't that what people's idea of heaven is? You believe, you know, a certain philosophy, you die, and now you're in heaven with everything's wonderful, and they're playing all your favorite hits, and Streets are flowing with milk and honey. You don't have to worry. You don't have to be afraid. You can do whatever you want, right? Isn't that what people think? Well, that ain't going to happen. But what can happen is, what music are they playing up there in heaven? I'm not wild about classical music all the time, But what can happen, as Jesus said, the kingdom of God is at hand, is that when we are totally focused on what's happening in the now, there is joy, there is peace, there is contentment, there is upliftment, there is peak experience. And every moment can be a peak experience. But what most people are doing is, the reason we're not in that state every moment is because we're in the mind. We're thinking. As Eckhart Tolle says, we're addicted to thinking. Addicted to thinking. Hey, I can identify with that. I love to think. Yeah, but Justin, don't we need to think? Yeah, we do. Our mind can be used as a tool. That's what it's meant to be. A tool to write, a tool to solve a problem. But every moment of the day, thinking, worrying, anxious, it's the mind. That's the challenge. See? So what really happens for most people is they're trying to create experiences out here that are so powerful that it will pull them out of their mind into the present moment where they have a peak experience, if they're lucky. And that can happen in a sports event. It could happen eating a wonderful meal. But how many wonderful meals are there? How many amazing sporting events are there that draw you out of your chaotic mind into the moment to where you're uplifted? Not that many. And what I'm saying is the sages are telling us that every moment can be a peak experience. That's what's amazing. And it's not, you don't have to be enlightened to have that experience. See? We see a sunset, for instance, and we, hopefully, for many people, they're in their heads. Oh, what a beautiful sunset. Oh, that reminds me of a sunset I saw when I was out in Hawaii on the mountaintop. Maybe I should get a house out there in Hawaii and live in Hawaii. Oh, but yeah, I don't like the job I'm in now anyway. In the meantime, this beautiful sunset's happening. Are they really experiencing it? Maybe for 2 seconds. If we really experience it, it'd be, wow, taking it in. But instead, the mind gets going. Don't take my word for it. Watch yourself. Observe yourself. Notice how often the mind is going. Hey, I noticed that in myself. A while ago, I started noticing a pattern in the morning when I would start preparing breakfast. Then my mind would start going about problems or things going on. This is why that the lady who's done a lot of work with writing, she talks about, she teaches people to write 30 minutes first thing in the morning because she had a lot of negativity going on, and I know some of you are familiar with that exercise. And I noticed what helped me was to start breaking that pattern by bringing awareness into what I'm doing, into the now moment. Pouring the oatmeal into the bowl, feeling the movement of the spoon, being present to chopping the apple. Why is that? What does that do? Does that give us marks with God? No, it brings us into the present moment where God is. God is not in the past. God is not in the future. God is not some being out there. We are part of God. You and I are expressions of God. And the reason we don't feel it is because we're in the mind all the time. See? So when you bring yourself into the now moment to be present, now you are present to experience presence. You get that? Present to experience presence. Why do the Zen monks talk about feeling the warm water as you're washing the dishes and so on? Why? Because what you're doing is you are disciplining your mind to be in the now. You're bringing your attention into the now, which is like a meditation. All of life can be like a meditation if we're constantly bringing our mind back to the present moment. See? And when you do that, you're going to notice something. You're going to notice your mind is wandering all the time. It's going into problems and worries and fears and all that. And so it's a meditation to bring your attention back to what you're doing. Focusing your attention again. And that's where the peak experiences can happen. See, feeling that oneness with whatever we're doing. Now, I'm not there yet. I'm not experiencing that every moment. I'm like you. I'm practicing. Okay? And I realize it's not easy. It's not easy. But that's what Patanjali's talking about, where the subject and object become one. When that sun is setting, you experience that oneness when you're really present to it, instead of in our heads. And they're telling us that can happen with everything. Can you think of a greater goal than that, than to be in peace and love and joy every single moment of the day? Nothing else is going to give you that. Everything else is going to be a momentary thing, right? People fly across the world to go to a, Michigan star, 4-star restaurant. I forgot what it's called. But, people fly across the world to have a meal in one of these restaurants. That's cool. I think that sounds like a neat thing to do. Why not? Well, how long does that pleasure last? Half an hour? Okay, now what? What are we going to do now? See, most people are trying to create experiences that draw them out of their mind. They don't realize that, so that they are in the now and experience presence. Well, that's a lot of work. And by the way, what about all the rest of the moments? What about all the other moments we have? That meal is over in 30 minutes or an hour. Then you can tell your friends about it, and then you can remember it, and then 2 years later, it's like, okay, where are we going to go now? What about the present moment? What about joy and peace now, in the present moment? So that's the practice. And, we've gone very deep here this morning. This is very deep stuff. This is not ho-hum. We're talking about life. We're talking about really living in the moment and being one with what's happening. People are either trying to control the world, trying to make it have these peak experiences, which don't happen very often, that pull their mind out. They try to do it with drugs or alcohol. Again, I'm not making judgments on that. I'm just saying that all that doesn't do it, ultimately. It doesn't help every moment to be a peak experience. But this practice of bringing our attention into the now moment. What about your mind, Justin? Don't we need the mind? Yes. As Tolle says, he says the enlightened person will use their mind when they need it. They'll solve the problem or, open up to that flow of creativity, and then back to being present. See? So the mind becomes a tool. You don't become a tool of your mind. We don't become the tool of our mind. The mind becomes our tool to be more present to what we're doing. Let me tell you, it's not easy. It's not easy. Just recently, yesterday, day before, I had something come up with someone I'm very close to. And it was, the challenge was on my mind. And it was very difficult to just bring my attention back to driving and enjoying the experience of driving, bring my mind back to preparing lunch or whatever I was doing, because that mind wanted to try to solve the problem. That mind was rehearsing what I was going to say and blah, 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 and there's a place for that. But it's not when you could be present to other things and be enjoying those present moments. I mean, I did manage to get back into the present, but it was challenging. And I'm saying it's not easy. It's challenging because we're so conditioned to identifying with the mind and being caught up in the mind. And I'm saying, bring yourself back to the present. Bring yourself back to the present. People are either trying to control the world to create these peak experiences that are rare, or they're controlling their mind with positive thinking, which is good, but thinking is on a lower plane than being present. Because being present is getting out of your mind. See, you're present, and then we can experience what Patanjali talks about, being conscious, experiencing where the subject and object become one. You are the sunset. You're experiencing the sunset completely. When you're listening to music, you're experiencing the music completely rather than, oh, I like this part that's coming up. Oh, yeah, well, this reminds me of when I was a kid and blah, 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 blah. Blah, 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 blah. Instead of letting the music wash over you. See? And other experiences. Being present to them. Letting the experience come in. And one of the reasons we don't do that is because we have so much stuff stuffed inside of us that if we let experiences come in, we're afraid we're going to experience that junk that's in there in our heart. And I've talked about that before, and we'll talk about it again in the future. But, add to your primary practices to be present in the moment. To be present to what you're doing. Doesn't mean you don't have goals. Doesn't mean you don't make plans. But it means that as you're living your life, you are totally bringing your consciousness into the present moment. And I think you'll find, one, you're going to learn how active that mind is and how challenging it can be to be in the present moment. And two, you're going to find that when you are in the present moment, it's peaceful and it's joyful. And you start to experience more of the peace that passes all understanding that Jesus the Christ spoke of. You start to experience freedom that the Buddha spoke of. It sounds simple, but it ain't easy. It takes practice. Let's get still for a moment. And we acknowledge, Spirit, that we are very living expressions of your presence. And that you are in everything. You're expressing as everything. Which makes sense that when we are present to what is happening in front of us, we are present to you. We're present to ourselves. The psalmist said, perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on thee. Now that doesn't necessarily mean that we're thinking God, 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 though that's a positive thing. But simply being present to what's happening is, in a way, keeping our mind on God. Just being fully present to what's happening in front of us. And we thank you, Spirit, for your guidance and direction. We thank you for this wisdom that has come to us from your great saints and sages. And we know and trust that we're being guided each and every moment, that you're giving us the strength and the power and the wisdom as we sincerely make the efforts to live these truths, that we're not alone, that you're always with us, within us, guiding us, protecting us, that we are your beloved children, so to speak. And even more intimately, we are your very expression, your very presence, and we're grateful. Amen. Thank you for being with us today. I just want to take a moment to thank Carlin Keys, Carla Hall and Jim Keys, and Peter Mayer for their music today. Coming to you from New York and Peter in Minnesota. Thank you. It was really enjoyed that music. I hope you did too. And thanks to Miguel, our host today, and Debbie Mullinex, our operations manager, and to Lucid, and to Perpetual Wave for all their work to help bring these live stream services to you and to help get it out to the world so that we can help to make an impact and to make a difference. Would you please join me now in praying and affirming the truth of God's guidance and protection. Together, the light of God surrounds us, the love of God enfolds us, the power of God protects us, the presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is, and all is well. Thanks for joining us today, the Unity Center of New York City. I'm Justin Epstein, and we look forward to seeing you again next time. Namaste.